If he does this, this will go down in history as not only Max's greatest title, but I think undoubtedly the greatest Formula One title of all time. This hasn't been done before to this extent. Hello and welcome to Racing News 365 answers your fan questions from last weekend's Qatar Grand Prix. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined by the dynamic duo that is 2023 Young Journalist of the Year, Sam Absolutely Coop, and the man, the myth, the almighty legend, that is lead editor Ian Parks. The duo are joining me to answer your brilliant questions from Qatar. As always, we have chosen 5 sent in at random. Thank you once again to everybody who sent in your questions. But Ian, before we get on with answering these questions, we've got what we were hoping for, a 3-way title decider going down to the wire in Abu Dhabi. 16 points between the three of them, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri. It is set up very, very nicely.
Beautifully poised, isn't it? We could not have asked for anything better at the end of this season, and I'm very fortunate and privileged to say that I will be there. It's an honour to be covering something like that when you get a sporting event that goes down to the wire like this. You know, we've had many seasons past in Formula One where we go into the last 1, 2, 3 Grand Prix and they've all been dead rubbers because the title's been decided a good few races previously. So on this occasion, we have got the perfect storm for us that's been set up, which I think we've got a couple of fan questions that are going to allude to some of the things we're going to be discussing about with regards to this title race decider now that we've got between Max, Lando and Oscar. And it's just, I'm really looking forward to it, as I think we all are, because we've got something to keep us hyped and going through the final week of this season now. So it's going to be fantastic, I'm sure.
I know we normally do 5 questions. I'm going to quickly add in a bonus 6. There's something I've just thought of, and Sam, I'll come to you on this, is of course, as we see in Abu Dhabi every year, we see several teams obviously use that for one of their mandatory rookie sessions. Oscar Piastri, as we know, is one of the drivers who will be sitting out first practice in Abu Dhabi. That could be crucial, couldn't it, to his understanding initially of the circuit?
Yeah, so it puts him slightly on the back foot, especially from a setup perspective. He's going to have, an hour less time on track to refine, hone, get that MCL 39 into the perfect window for him. The luck for Oscar really is that Abu Dhabi is a track that they're all pretty familiar with. They have all raced in it through, F2 and also through young driver rookie tests. So he will be more than well acquainted enough with that circuit that he should be able to jump in and hit the ground running. And we've seen previous points of the season that having no bearing at all on performance. Lando Norris missed the first practice session at Mexico City, and absolutely blew the field away. So it does put him slightly on the back foot, but realistically, it shouldn't be a deciding factor when the weekend is when it shakes out and we get a champion.
And just to add to Sam's point, FP1, of course, are not representative conditions because FP2 are the more representative conditions for qualifying and the Grand Prix. So, yes, a small back foot, but not much, given the overall perspective on the weekend.
It's still probably my personally least favourite FP1 of the season, when you have so many drivers who have just not done a single race in F1. It makes the timing screen look very confusing, I've got to be said. But anyways, going on with the 5 questions from the fans. And Ian, I'll come to you first with the first one from Susan. Did McLaren accept a mistake was made with its strategy in Qatar? Of course, this surrounds McLaren's decision not to pit at the end of lap 7 following the safety car for the crash for Nico Hülkenberg, because everybody else, as we discussed in the F1 update and the podcast, did decide to pit.
Thank you very much, Susan, for the question. In short, just to be nice and succinct, yes, effectively, team principal Andrea Stella did apologise. He did, it's not apologise, that's the wrong way. He did say that the procedures implemented by the team were incorrect. So that's as good as an acceptance as you are ever likely to get, that the strategy deployed by McLaren on this particular occasion was the wrong one. And as we saw, it had knock-on effect that resulted in Max Verstappen winning the Grand Prix and Oscar second, Lando fourth. Again, to use a phrase from Andrea Stella in his post-Grand Prix debrief with the media, he said that McLaren, because of that incorrect decision regarding its strategy, were significantly penalised. And as we saw, that's how it played out. As I said, Oscar second, Lando fourth, and that has now lent itself into us having, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this three-way title fight with Max 12 points behind Lando and Oscar a further 4 points adrift, and the various permutations we now have got around who could win and how. So at least from McLaren's perspective, they've recognised, acknowledged that yes, they were incorrect in what they did. And Andrea also added as well that there will now be a significant review going on behind the scenes, probably almost certainly taking place, but they are going to absolutely want to nail it going into this weekend because they cannot afford to have another mistake occur, as was the case on lap 7 in Qatar on Sunday.
Which leads us on very nicely to the next question. Sam, you can have this one. It comes from Didier. Should each side of McLaren's garage work independently in Abu Dhabi to give each driver the fairest chance of the title?
It's a very good question. I personally think to an extent, yes. Do I think McLaren will? No. And it kind of, to build on something I was talking about in the podcast yesterday, McLaren has very much operated as a single cell organism across its pit wall this year. And it's like it looks at strategy from a, kind of whole perspective of, right, we're making these decisions in unison. They're all conjoined. They're, this is what we're doing with Oscar. This is what we're doing with Lando. Whereas other teams, and maybe what McLaren should do is go, what do we do with the driver that's ahead? And then once we've decided that, what the optimal strategy is for the driver who's earned that right to have that preference because they've outperformed the other across the weekend to that point. Once we've sorted that out, we can then address how we then react with the second driver, which potentially would have led to a different decision-making process in Qatar and potentially then a different result. And I think whilst McLaren should do that, I don't think they will necessarily. I think in terms of setup information, that kind of thing, I think that will continue to be free-flowing. It always has been for McLaren. We won't see a Mercedes type kind of, this is very much our side of the garage. This is, your side of the garage, and we are complete opposites or enemies. But what Lando and Oscar both need is their strategy guys, their side of the pit wall to be going, we're advocating for our driver. This is what is in the interest of our driver in this moment. And then it is for Andrea Stella and Zach Brown to decide if that is the right course of action for the team at large. That is probably the most appropriate way that it can work. Whether or not McLaren will do that is a different story, because you've also got the championship fight. Yes, you could say Oscar's leading. This is the best thing for him to do. But if Max is in, if Max is in position where, he could potentially still take the title if something happens to Oscar, you've also then got to think about how Lando, it's such a complex picture that it's not just about this race. You've also got to think about the championship challenge, and that is going to be a dynamic, evolving situation over the race. So there's an element of, there is no one size fits all. There is no, this is how we're doing it and we're going to stick to it. They will have to adapt across the race, across the weekend. So it's incredibly difficult to call. But ultimately, if we can use Qatar as a case study, I would have done something different. As I said in the podcast, I would have had two parts that make the whole, as opposed to one whole across the pit wall that is making decisions, which ultimately led them to deciding to do the same thing with both driver, which seems like at this stage a fundamentally flawed decision.
In the title fight, of course, it's Max who finds himself in a McLaren sandwich, currently in second, 12 points adrift of Lando. He is Lando's biggest threat in terms of the mathematics going into the season finale. It's easy to forget, Ian, that after Zandvoort, he was 104 points adrift of the top of the championship, which of course was held by Oscar Piastri at the time. So the next question comes from Mohammed. Where would this rank on the list of greatest F1 titles if Max does steal the title?
Are we all doing this one, or is this
let's
just one?
all do it. Why not? You can go
not
first.
Just Max titles, of all titles.
Of all time.
All time.
That's a great question.
I will. You go first, mate. You give us your opinion.
Yes. I quite simply, from 104 points, if he's still got 12 more points to overcome, if he does this will go down in history as not only Max's greatest title, but I think undoubtedly the greatest Formula One title of all time. This hasn't been done before to this extent, and it will just further write Max's name in the history books. And I think, without a shadow of a doubt, he then moves into probably the top 3 greatest F1 drivers of all time. Top 5, I think he's already there. But if he does this, given the car he's had for parts of this season, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, for me, it would be the greatest title achievement, the greatest title victory of all time. Ian?
I'm sensing a winter podcast coming on where we discuss the top five drivers of all time.
4, do a Mount Rushmore. That'd be an easy way to do it.
The Mount Rushmore of F1. I like that. That's quite cool. Where would it rank? Certainly for me, it would be his best of those that he's won. And of course, yes, when you look at the 2021 showdown with Lewis Hamilton, they're very different, aren't they? That's the thing. When you look at titles in isolation, and where should you rank them? That 2021, of course, was just a tumultuous backwards and forwards between him and Lewis. This is very different because we've not had that. He's had to come from so far back. And if he does go on and win it, it will be certainly the greatest comeback of all time in F1. Given, as you say, that points gap of 104 to Oscar, that was just 8 races ago. It seemed like the title was done and dusted. Max had pretty much not thrown in the towel completely, but it was just a case of, well, I'm just going to go out and see what I can do. And hopefully we get the car in a better window and I can have a few good races before the end of the season, a few good performances. Lo and behold, it's now materialized into something way more than that. And he's standing on the brink of this seismic event in Formula One, is the way I'd put it, if he did go on and win this title. So in terms of comeback, I think, yes, it's the best. In terms of a title fight, for me, 2021 will always have the edge over anything else. And just simply because of the way 2021 ended in such explosive fashion again. Could we get anything like that on Sunday in Abu Dhabi? We don't have Michael Massey in charge for number 1. So, but yeah, it would just be huge. Absolutely huge if he managed to do it, and certainly right up there with some of the greatest titles ever won in F1 history.
Sam?
I think the beauty of this question is also what makes it so difficult is that there are so many different ways of looking at it and tackling it, as Ian has kind of pointed to. I think what I really like, say Max wins this, what I love about his would-be 5 titles is they all have a real different flavour to them. There's the differences that make them exceptional in their own ways. And we've compared this a lot to 2010 to 2007 in the last few weeks, especially 2007 in terms of the fight back that Kimi Räikkönen had. But in 2007, the Ferrari was pretty strong all year. From the get-go, it was McLaren versus Ferrari, and that carried on to 2008. And I think what makes this so unique is that the Red Bull has been so poor this year that actually it's more comparative in many ways to 1986 when Alain Prost in a McLaren got the better of the 2 Williams drivers, Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet, at the final race and somehow managed to win that title against a dominant Williams. So I think that's a closer benchmark. But for me, I think what Max has achieved this year is more exceptional than that because the Red Bull has been so bad at that point. That mid-season lull was really poor Hungary was a dreadful weekend for the team. And Laurent Mekies has turned it around since taking over. Not just him, but he's helped facilitate that. So Max isn't the only facet of this, but he has been exceptional throughout the year. I think you really could make a very strong argument for it being the greatest F1 drivers title of all time. So yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. But I think it's also, as I kind of alluded to at the start, an impossible question to comprehensively and fully answer.
We can have this argument during the off season if Max does get it done. Obviously, if he doesn't get it done, we can't have this argument. So down to you, Max. Good luck, mate. Right, next question. And Ian, you can do this one. It comes from Elena. What has caused the online abuse towards Kimi Antonelli following the Qatar Grand Prix?
Yeah, this is a very, very sad situation that we find ourselves in, and it's just a sad aspect of the world in which we unfortunately live in with social media now. And poor Kimi, absolutely, he's not deserved anything that has come his way. Of course, in context, he was being chased by Lando Norris, although in fairness, Kimi was actually chasing Williams' Carlos Sainz ahead of him for a potential shot at the podium. So we had Carlos third, Kimi fourth, and Lando pressing very hard from behind because, of course, Lando was trying to make up for the strategic error of his team earlier in the Grand Prix. And unfortunately, was it the penultimate lap, guys? Just to help me out
here,
I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was 56 or 57. Yeah.
I think it was the penultimate lap. Kimi just made a really bad error or something occurred within the car. Even he wasn't sure when I asked him about it in the driver's pen post-race. At turn 9, his car got really badly out of shape, and in doing so, that allowed Lando Norris to go through and take 4th position off Kimi. The suggestion from, first of all, Gianpiero Lambiase on the Red Bull pit wall, Max's race engineer, and also Helmut Marko, the Red Bull advisor, has unfortunately lent into the narrative that has now followed. Both of them remarked that they thought, in their estimation, Kimi's error, as it proved to be, was him allowing Lando through. The fact it was a bit too easy. And unfortunately, people out there, and I won't call them fans because you cannot be a fan if you're abusing a very young man in his first year in Formula One, who is an exceptional character, can I just add. I've spoken to him numerous occasions. I've interviewed him on numerous occasions over the course of this season, and he's just a really heartwarming guy. His heart and soul are in the sport. He loves the sport. He's done his absolute best this season in what has been quite a roller coaster year for him. Started off on such a high, some good results, had that real awful blip throughout the year with his results, and now has come good again over the course of the season. And we've unfortunately had this wave of online abuse towards him. There's been death threats directed towards him. He's gone dark with his image on his Instagram. He's just put a black image. And Toto Wolff even had his say post-race, describing Helmut Marko as brainless for the comment that Helmut came out with, suggesting that Kimi had allowed Lando through to claim that extra 2 points that, yes, they could ultimately be very beneficial for Lando in the championship come the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix on Sunday. But at no stage, no way did Kimi Antonelli just allow Lando Norris by. As I say, he was chasing for a podium himself. So Toto was well within his rights to describe Helmut as brainless. And what we've had since, we've had a statement from Red Bull to clarify that at no point on reflection now do they believe that Kimi Antonelli did allow Lando through, and Helmut Marko has also issued his own statement apologising for the abuse that Kimi has received, and that having reviewed the footage again himself of the incidents, that whilst there were 2 in particular that he was looking at, the first he thought he could have defended a little bit more robustly, but the second and the one that ultimately let Lando through, he now absolutely agrees that it was not Kimi letting Lando by, that there was a degree of either a driver or car error at that particular time, given the way Kimi was pushing himself to try and get that third place of Carlos. A very, very sad state of affairs to come out of this Grand Prix, when we should really be focusing on the dynamic of this astonishing title race that we now have between Lando, Max and Oscar.
Yeah, there is absolutely no room at all for online abuse in any shape or form. Final question, and it comes from Jamie Sam. You can take this one. How much pressure does Ferrari face to ace 2026 after what has been a horrific 2025 season?
Well, before we start recording, when we were running through some of the questions, my immediate response was all the pressure and then add some more. And I stand by it. I think it will be, there's so much attention on Ferrari for a myriad of reasons next season. You know, most recently, John Elkann, the chairman's comments, has cast a very, very bright spotlight on the team and how the team responds over the winter and into 2026. There's so much pressure. There's heads on the chopping block at this stage because they've slipped to fourth in the Constructors' Championship. That is now confirmed as of the Qatar Grand Prix. They were 15 points away from winning the Constructors' title in 2024. To fall to the point that they're fourth with a race to go is an unacceptable outcome for the team. And you've got to be looking at 2026 and saying, you know, first and foremost, if Lewis cannot bring the level of performance that was expected of him, there'll be a lot of attention, a lot of pressure there on whether or not he stays in the sport, whether or not he stays at Ferrari, you know, either above. You can't expect that he's going to move on to another team at this stage in his career. It probably will be retirement. But we've always said that 2026 was what was key for Lewis. A year to bed in, then regulations. That will be critically important. But for really the head that's most on the chopping block, you've got to assume, is Fred Vasseurs. He has had a lot of support from the team. John Elkann came out and made a statement towards I think it was around the Austin, Mexico tilt of the season, saying that we fully back him. He was given an extension before the summer break. But you've got to be looking at, if the team doesn't ace this next regulation set, which it has every opportunity to do so, it is a complete blank sheet of paper, both on the power unit and the chassis side of the regulations. There's every opportunity for Ferrari to come out the gate swinging. But if it doesn't, you've got to be looking at who the accountable executive is at that team, because ultimately there needs to be a head at that stage. And you would assume it would be Fred Vasseur. And you would assume if Lewis then can't bring his level of performance up to where Charles is, that he will also make way at the end of 2026 when his contract expires. Because as we know, there's Ollie Behrman, who's been performing very, very strongly of late, waiting in the wings at Ferrari, and also plenty of other options, driver-wise, who would love to seat a Ferrari, or if you're Carlos Sainz, to get back into a seat at Ferrari. So they've got plenty of options at Ferrari. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure. They are probably the team that's under the most pressure, truth be told. So yeah, quite a long answer for a fairly simple reality.
Just to very quickly to add Sam's point, of course, what we learned over the course of the Qatar Grand Prix weekend during the team principals press conference on Friday, in which Fred Vasseur was present, is that it was his call to stop the aero development on this year's car at the end of April, one of the earliest cutoffs that we've discovered over the course of this season, to focus on the 2026 car. So, as Sam has quite rightly pointed out, his neck is on the chopping block, even more so now that we know that that call was made at the end of April to focus on 26. That 2026 Ferrari is going to have to come flying out the traps and be a serious title contender from the get-go for Fred not to lose his position at some point along the way if things don't go well.
And on that note, this brings an end to us answering your fan questions from the Qatar Grand Prix. Sam, Ian, amazing stuff as always. For those watching this video, please be sure to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below your thoughts on anything we have answered and anything you would like answering after Abu Dhabi. Who do you think should win the title? Let us know that as well. From myself, Sam, and Ian, we will see you this weekend for the title deciding Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. See you later.
See you in Abu Dhabi, folks. Take care. Until the next time.
Thanks for joining us as always.